Chapter 1. We solved these equations back in chapter 1. To get rid of x squared, we have to take the square root. Remember the check mark looking thing? Okay. And that square root means what number times itself gives me 25? What number times itself gives me 25? 5, right? 5 times 5. What's another number times itself that would give me 25? They got to be the same. It's got to be the same. 5 times 5 gives me 25, but what other number? Nope. 5 times 5 gives me 25, but there's another number. 6 times 6 is 36. You got to multiply. The other one is negative 5. Negative 5 times negative 5 is a positive. So remember when we would do the plus minus sign? Remember that? Okay. Means you have two answers, a positive and a negative. Now, you guys could know that one off the top of your head. Other ones you're not going to know on the top of your head. So we got to find that button on our calculator again. You're looking for the check mark. You're looking for the check mark. Most of you, it's to the left of number 7 and in the background. Like you have the button that says x squared, and then in a different color on the background, it's got that check mark, right? Everybody see it? To get to that, we have to hit the second key. So we're going to take the square root of both of these. So in your calculator, you push the second key, the x squared button, and then type 256. When you do that, your screen should say the square root of 256. I want you to do it. Everybody look. This button is to the left of the 7. Number 7 is right here. You go to the left, it's in the background. So to get to that, you got to push the second button. Where's the second button? Top left. Yep, it's a different color. And then you hit that x squared button, and then 256. And on your screen, it should say this. Caitlin, remember you type your number first, then hit that check mark, right?
What are you talking about?
Okay, everybody stop because you're not listening and there's a lot of extra conversation happening. Everybody put your finger on the number 7.
On the calculator or the big phone?
Go to the left towards Weese's room. Now you should be touching an x squared button, yes?
Yeah.
That's the button in the background. You'll see the check mark. But first we have to hit the second key, so we use that. So second is that top left one. It literally says second. Then hit that x squared button. It should put a check mark on your screen. Then 256. Yours is different. So yours is this button right here. Yep, and then you got 256. Yours is actually kind of nice. You don't even have to hit the second key. It has its own button. So you type that one and then 256. Yours is just a little bit different than theirs. Yep.
Do we put another position?
Did you get it? Did you get it? You guys good? Got it. Got it. Got it. Did you get it? You figure it out? Okay, when you hit equals, what do you get? 16. But what did Ms. Hoff remind you? Really, there's two answers, right? A positive and a negative 16. So put that plus and minus sign. Okay, now let's do c squared, the very last problem. Take the square root of it on your own without saying the answer out loud. Practice typing this in your calculator because when it comes to your homework and it comes to your quiz, Ms. Hoff and Mr. Brees can't tell you how to type it in your calculator. So everybody type in the square root of 324 and write down what you get as your answer. What do you get as your answer?
18.
18. Now, your answer needs to say C equals plus or minus, 18. Don't have C squared anymore, and don't have a check mark anymore. Okay, make sure you write your answer correctly. Okay, now why would we do that when we've been talking about triangles and angles? So this impacts us today. So today our main focus are right triangles. A right triangle is a triangle with one right angle. What's a right angle? 90 degrees. Very good. So a right triangle is a triangle that has a 90-degree angle. The legs, they call them legs, are the sides that form that right angle. The hypotenuse is the side across from the right angle. It is the longest side of the triangle. It is always the longest, and that's something we're going to continually check every single time. Okay, I just threw a ton of vocab at you. Let's put it in a diagram that seems to help us. How do I know where my 90 degrees is? Very good, the square in the corner. Okay, the two sides that form that box, the one going up and down and the one going across the bottom, are called legs. They are called legs. The side that is across from the 90 degrees is called the hypotenuse. Hypotenuse. Can you guys say that? Hypotenuse. Very good. And Marilyn, we also know it's the longest. So every single time, that side should be the longest. It's a good way for us to check. Leg, leg, hypotenuse. Leg, leg, hypotenuse. Okay, here's that crazy word, Jack. You ready? The Pythagorean theorem. Say it. Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem is what we are going to use all week long. It is one of the most important things you learn in 8th grade math. Just like slope and y-intercept. It's right up there. So the Pythagorean theorem describes a relationship between the lengths of the legs and the lengths of the hypotenuse for any right triangle. Hypotenuse. Hypotenuse. In a right triangle, the sum of the squares of the lengths is equal to the square of the lengths of the hypotenuse. Yikes, right? Like that seems confusing. Sum means what in math? Add. We are going to add the squares of the legs and set it equal to the square of the hypotenuse. Right down here. All week long, we are going to use a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. The most important thing, this is your 90 degrees. C has to be the hypotenuse. Technically, you could call this side A and this side B. It doesn't matter. But the C has to be the hypotenuse. It's the longest side. He has to be by himself. Okay? All right, Miss Off, you've given us a whole bunch of vocab, and we've done no math today. Flip it over. Okay, so let's put this into play. First thing I notice about this triangle, it's got this box in the corner, which tells me what? It's 90 degrees, okay? Which means I have a right triangle. This works only for the sides. We are no longer dealing with the angles, okay? We're talking about how long the sides are. So we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And the most important thing is that c is the hypotenuse. Where do I find the hypotenuse? It's the biggest one. Very good. So what Ms. Hoff would ask you to do is take Liana's advice. It's across from the 90 degrees. Point to the 90, draw directly across, and circle that. That's the hypotenuse. That's C. Okay, when we're done, that side should be the longest. So let's fill it in. What are we going to use for A? 21. What are we going to use for B? 20. And what are we going to use for C?
Don't know.
C, because we don't know it, right? So now, take A squared plus B squared equals C squared, and we have to fill this in. What'd you tell me A was? 21 squared plus, you don't need your calculator yet, What's B? 20 squared equals C squared. Now, grab your calculator. This is a little bit different. Don't use the check mark. Don't use the check mark. We actually want to figure out what 21 squared is. So now you actually want to hit that x squared button. So if you type 21 and then hit the squared, don't have a check mark on your screen. Don't have a check mark on your screen. Okay? 21 squared. Don't put anything besides 21 squared in there. Don't put plus anything. Don't put plus anything. Just 21 squared. Who can tell me what 21 squared is? Very good. 441 plus, now type in 20 squared. 400. And C squared is C squared. What do you think I do next? We need to add those two together. We need to add those two together because they're on the same side of the equal sign. 841 equals C squared. That's what C squared equals. But I want to know just C. How do I get rid of that squared? I got to do the check mark one. I got to do that check mark one. So this is where you got to do the check mark on your calculator. Because when I check mark that, it gets rid of the squared and I leave just C.
29.
It's a whole number?
Yeah.
Yeah? Ooh, that's always nice when it's a whole number. What is the label on my 29? Centimeters. Liana, remind me. Oh, you told me it was across from 90 degrees. Somebody else tell me, what do we know about the hypotenuse? It's the longest. Does that stand true? Did we calculate where it's the longest?
Yeah.
29 is bigger than 21 and 20.
Yeah.
Okay? The equation has two solutions technically when we take that squared, but you can't really have a negative side length. So the hypotenuse has a length of 29 centimeters. All right, so we do this again. Everybody see the right triangle? Got my 90 degrees down here. Okay, so we're going to go a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Ms. Hoff says the first thing to do is to identify your hypotenuse. Liana reminded us this is across from the 90 degrees. So start at your 90 degrees and draw straight across. What is your hypotenuse in this triangle? X. What letter, A, B, or C, is your hypotenuse? C. It's always C. So instead of C squared, we're going to have X squared. What number are you going to plug in for A?
16.
16. Okay, so we have 16 squared. And what are you going to plug in for B? 12 squared. Okay. What's my next step? Square them. Very good. On your own, take 16 squared, write it down. And 12 squared, write it down. Don't add them yet. Don't add them yet. $16 squared, what'd you guys get? 256 plus 12 squared is 144. Now I need to add those two together. 256 plus 144, 400. Now what do I do? Now the check mark, take the square root. 20? Anybody else get 20?
Yeah.
20, what's my label? Ooh, careful. Feet. Now, X stood for our hypotenuse. Our hypotenuse should be the longest. Does this look like the longest?
Yeah.
20 is bigger than 16 and 12. Okay? I want you to do example 3 all on your own. Okay? It's exactly what we just did up above. Determine what A is, determine what B is, determine what C is, and fill it in. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Zayden, don't. Okay, second, and then your x squared button. Yep. Then type in your 400. Good question. Good job asking.
That's not right.
Hey, you're supposed to be doing this problem, not coloring. You're going to have to use 12 and 5, yep. A and B doesn't matter, remember. Okay, but if you don't have any work, I'm not giving you any credit. You have nothing written down. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit you with that. What is C? What'd you get, Allison? 13, what'd you put as a label? Feet. Anybody else get 13 feet? Yes. Okay. Does it matter if A is 5 or if A is 12? No. What matters is that C stays C. 5 squared plus 12 squared. You could have them flip-flopped. 25 plus 144 equals C squared. When you add them together, you get 169. Then we take the check mark, and you get 13 feet. Okay. All right. Seems pretty straightforward. Here's your curveball. Oh, just kidding. Oh, yeah, let's go to example 5. We're going to go to the airplane. Let's go to example 5. By the raise of your hand, somebody tell me what's different about this airplane problem than every other one that we've done. Bryce? It's not the x. Very good. It's always going to be the longest, but we actually know our hypotenuse this time. That's different, right? On the other ones we were doing, that was the one we don't know. So this is why it's so important to identify that hypotenuse. So the first thing that I'm going to tell you to do every single time is to draw an arrow from that 90 degrees across the triangle and circle that 13. That tells you that has to be your C. Now, which one do you want to be A? X, okay. And what do you want to be B? 12. So in our equation, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. What is going to go in for A? X squared. What's going to go in for B? 12 squared. And what's going to go in for C? 13 squared. Now the difference is we got an equal sign here. They're not on the same side anymore. So first we're going to square them. Still square them. Okay? Leave your x squared. 12 squared is 144. And 13 squared is 169. Okay? Now, yes, equals 169. Now, we are going to solve for x squared. So I cover up x squared. I have a positive 144. How do I move it to the other side? Subtract 144 to the other side. X squared equals 169 minus 144, 25. Enough. I'm tired of hearing that. Because you're not done. So what do you do now? The check mark. X equals 5. And what's my label? Miles. Very good. Miles. Now, If this is 5, does it still stand true that my hypotenuse is the longest?
No.
13 is still bigger than 5 and bigger than 12, which is what we want, right? That's what we want. Okay, let's go straight down. Example 7. This one's drawn a little goofy. So sometimes it's easiest if we trace this. Okay, so here's our triangle. Everybody see our triangle? Ignore the rest of the shape. And for some of us, it might even be easier. You're like, what, Miss Hoff? I'm gonna redraw this triangle over here so I don't get confused. Here's my 90 degrees in the corner. What's my side over here? X. What's my side here? 45. What's my side here? 50. See what I did? I just moved that triangle over here so it's a little bit easier to see. What is the first thing I should do now? Identify A, B, and C. Easiest one to start with is C. From the 90 degrees straight across. Circle it. What's C? 50. I'm going to put a C right next to it. What's A? 45? Okay. What's B? Would be your X, yes? Everybody take a minute, fill in your equation. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Put in X, 45, and 50 where they're supposed to go. What are you putting in for A? 45 squared. B, X squared, and C, 50 squared. Everybody square those numbers and write them down. Jack, what'd you get for 45 squared?
225.
2025 plus X squared equals, Sarah, what'd you get for 50 squared? 2,500. Very good. Who can raise their hand and tell me my next step? Petro? Subtract 2025 to the other side. These cancel out. I bring down X squared equals, Leanna, did you already subtract it?
2025. Wait, no, it's 475.
I was going to say, I think you were right the first time, 475. You're right. Okay. Then I need to square root. This is where my check mark comes into play, right?
Yeah.
And what happens when you type that in? You get a big, nasty decimal. This is the first time we've seen this. Okay? I'm going to peer over Addie's shoulder here. According to her calculator, it says 21.79449,472. And Ms. Hoff is going to tell you that on your directions today, it's going to say round to the nearest tenth. How many numbers are we going to have after our decimal point then? With tenth, only one. Okay? So I know that 21 and 0.7 are what I'm looking at. But what I have to decide is about that 7. So I go one number over. Is that high enough to round this up? Yes. So my X would actually equal 21.8, and what's my label? Feet. 21.8 feet. Okay. I want you to try example 6. Start to finish on your own. Don't say anything out loud. Once everybody's done, I will double check it with you. Example 6, the one with the kite. Example 6. Identify your A, B, and C, and then fill it in. Make sure you're writing this equation out. Some of you are trying to take a shortcut. Write this whole thing out so that you remember what you're doing. It's back to that chapter 2, solving equations. Can't end with a square. What's your next step? Oh, you got it there. Gotcha. What should you get as an answer? 35.7. Now let's talk about how we get there. The very first thing you need to do, draw your arrow across from the 90 degrees and get your hypotenuse. In this case, our hypotenuse is 50. My C is 50. I'm going to use A as 35 and B is over here, which is my unknown. So your equation should say A squared plus B squared equals C squared. A we said is 35 squared. B I'm just going to leave as B squared. And C is 50 squared. Now some of you may have written A squared plus 35 squared. That's fine. If your A and B are flip-flopped, that's fine. 35 squared is, Tone? 1225 plus B squared equals 2,500. Then what do you show me? Okay, and I'm going to tell you right now, some of you got lazy and you didn't show me this work. I will not give you credit for this. 1225, right? Is that right? When you subtract them? I think it is, yes? No? Oh, I have my numbers backwards. 1275, correct? Sorry, I couldn't read my own handwriting. Then you take the square root, and you get 35 point... What's after the 7? 0. Good, which then turns into 35.7. What's my label? M stands for meters. Nicely done. Meters. If the number after it is 5 or higher. Yes, you are correct. Yep, you are correct. Okay, Miss Hoff made those just your notes, and I printed your worksheet homework separately so that you didn't have to flip back and forth, okay? So your homework is 9 questions. You have the rest of the hour to work.